Here's the login screen for the application, and I do actually have to give it valid credentials because it's a real application. There are actually some WCF services, for example, that are running that supply the data. This is the first screen that someone sees coming in. This is the dashboard, which contains various areas containing information for different roles, different types of users. That green area in the upper left, for example, would contain statistics that are often of interest to a business owner. If you're not a business owner, then you could slide that back out of the way so that you've got more room for this job board. That's aimed more at salespeople so that they see the particular orders that are the best opportunities for them to place some temporary workers. And this area can come back down if you'd like to see it. Over in this portion of the screen are action items, things that the system has decided need some sort of attention. In this case, for example, we see that there's some tax information missing for this Edward fellow. If I click that particular item, we go not just to his record, but all the way down to the individual subscreen that contains the area that has data that needs attention. You can always go back to that dashboard by pressing this home icon down here. So as you see, everything there is clickable, including things like positions requested up in the statistics. We see the details there. There are 15 here and 5 there. And so that adds up to the total of 20 that we saw on that previous statistic. There are also some quick links down here in this corner of the screen so that you can add a new employee or a new order or something like that. Along the bottom are the icons that represent major modules or data entities that are part of the system. If you click one of those, what you get is what we call a home screen for that particular entity. This is the one for customers. The home screens all look pretty much the same. They contain an area here for the items that have been returned from a search. They contain the recently accessed customers, your most recently used list, and if there are any open customers, they appear up here. At the top, there's this little Google-ish searching type bar. So if we put in Gmail, for example, we get items that have Gmail somewhere downstream. For example, in this case, there's a contact that has a Gmail address, and that's the reason that particular record was returned. Let's go back to the search we had before. These items that are being shown as the returned items are being displayed in a list box. The list box uses something called a data template to display exactly the things that the user is most interested in. Data templates can also have interactivity, so that, for example, we can see a map associated with this particular item. Since it's the headquarters, we'll also see all the items below it. We can zoom in. I just picked out some items around my hometown of Nashville for this particular sample record, so you can see that we can map those, and we have the usual capabilities of virtual Earth to do an aerial view and so forth. Also, you can see an organization chart of all those branches. Now, this is an area where we felt like it's a really good application of the visual nature of WPF and Silverlight to give users a better way of looking at a hierarchy of locations. Typically that's done with drop downs or something like that. Most users don't visualize that very well. A tree-based organization chart is a much better way to show relationships among different offices. So that's what we use with expandable and collapsible nodes. If the org chart gets too big, then there's zooming capability. That's done with some technology in WPF and Silverlight called transforms, and actually it's pretty easy. That capability is pretty quick to build in. Each individual item here has a context menu, so you can right-click on it, edit that particular item, create a new child item underneath it, or if they need some workers, you could add an order for those workers right here. Now let's take a look at some of the editing functionality. Oh, wait. Oh, one last thing I wanted to show you before moving on. This data template here, which has quite a bit of detail in it, can be switched out on the fly. Suppose you had a very long list, for example. You might want to go back to a briefer list that didn't show nearly as much detail, and then switch back to the detailed list when you need it. Now let's take a look at the editing experience. Let's bring up this particular record and see how it's edited. A lot of the editing experience looks very similar to what you would have in other technologies. If you could work on a date, for example, well, there's a date picker for that. However, there are some ways that you can apply the capabilities of WPF and Silverlight to get a superior editing experience using some good visual feedback. So, for example, if I go to edit an address, watch as the main record fades to the background and gets a grayish cast over it, and a child screen comes up to edit that particular address. I'll show you that effect again. Let's close this screen, bring this up for editing, and we see that we've got a gray cast back there. This can be dragged around, by the way. You can't click back here. This is the only active screen. Now, we keep up with things like, is there unsaved data? See this area up there at that part of the screen displays a little indicator if there's data that's been changed but not saved. And it knows how to track it so that that indicator goes away if the data is reversed back to a state where it's completely clean again. One of the nice things about the way we implemented this particular feature is that even though this is kind of modal to the screen that it's in front of, it doesn't prevent you from going to other parts of the application. This is something that in older technologies was hard to do. If you made something modal, you had to pretty much dump the data here or finish it before you went to some other screen. So suppose somebody called up a phone call, for example, from an employee while you're working on a customer. You'd like to be able to go directly over there. Well, we've made it so that you can. You can go directly over to the employee screen, pick somebody out, and bring that record up and do whatever it is you'd be interested in doing with the employee. And then when you're ready, you can go back to that customer screen and it'll be exactly in the state that you left it. That, as I said, in a Windows Forms application with a modal dialog is pretty difficult. But even in an ASP.NET application, there really isn't a good solution for that because you would have to open a separate browser window and then the user would have to be responsible for keeping up with all of those. One of the favorite features that people tend to like a lot about this particular implementation and design are these little notes on the side. During requirements gathering, it was discovered that there is sometimes a need to attach a note to a record, and normally there are not more than one or two, so we decided just to make them expandable notes that would be stuck on the sides. They're editable right here, and if you move somewhere else in the record, they go back. If you're looking at a record and you decide you don't need to see it anymore, you can unclick it and it disappears from the list. So the sticky notes are one example of where you can use the list box templating capability of WPF and Silverlight in a very, very sophisticated way. And actually on my website, billyhollis.com, under the Resources tab, you'll see some sample code that is a Silverlight implementation of that sticky note. So you can actually see how that's done. It's done with something called control templates. Let's look at a few other interactivity features. So if we go back to that employee that we had open there, we wanted pictures, but we didn't want necessarily to dedicate a whole lot of room for them. However, at times you do want to see the picture a little bigger. So we made it so that when you get over the picture, it gets bigger, and when you get off of it, it goes back. That's also the way that we allow users to remove a picture, because that button appears when it's time, or when the picture is expanded. So if someone needs to get rid of the picture, they can press that button and do it. If there is no picture there, then there is a button that shows that allows people to add a picture. Other parts of the employee record that have some interesting usability. This is kind of a traditional thing, but we feel like we did a pretty good job in terms of the cosmetics of it. You can think of this as the normal box that has several options and you wanted to pick some of them. So as you type it, it screens down the list to only matching things. So let's presume that Anna is a pipe welder here. When we go to add that capability, that skill, to her record, then we have configurable levels. Maybe she's an apprentice pipe welder, and so we add that skill to her list. The availability tab allows you to specify hours for people. It turned out that the sample data was for a company that wanted to make that 24 hours a day for everybody. So let's see if we can't bring this down a little bit. Let's suppose that Anna would is willing to come in as early as 6, and we'll work up to about 7, except maybe on Thursdays she has to go home a little early. Maybe she's got some family responsibilities. And you actually can either drag it here or change it in the list box, and everything is bound together so that changing the information in one place updates it in all the other places that need updating. Another fairly nifty piece of interactivity, if we go to that employee screen there, if we hover over somebody, we see that there actually is a little pop-up that comes up, but think of it as a very, very sophisticated tooltip. And that allows us to supply more detail for this particular person beyond what the data template already supplies. Now this brings up an interesting way in which we found that user interface design tends to change a little bit. Because we have templates and we can display anything we want, we display the most important information there, and then information that is less frequently needed but still pretty important, we put in more of that pop-up kind of format, and then if they want to see complete details, they're able to go over to someone's record and look at everything that there is to be known about them and to change any of that information. That list box color formatting capability is also used in places such as the hiring steps. You see that there's color coding on these items here. This is a configurable list of things that need to be done before someone is allowed to be placed. And for example, if we wanted to show that that step had been done, we save that, we see that it turns green. That kind of capability, where you're able to change the color of items depending on the data, is done with a capability of WPF and Silverlight called value converters. So I hope that this has given you a pretty good feel for this application as a whole and some of the features that we think make it more productive for people to use as well as more attractive. There certainly are studies that say that just the fact that an application is attractive means that users will like it better and it's low stress. But we think that even more important is coming up with ways to promote the workflow that people have in a routine business day. And we think we've done a reasonably good job of that with this temporary staffing application.